Happy Pi Day, everybody, and welcome to another version of Android Developer Relations Office Hours. The first thing I want to start with is intro, starting with the gentleman who is on my left.
Hi, I'm Andy Stadler. I'm visiting today from the Android Market team in case there's any questions about the new expansion file features.
Otherwise known as OBB. On my right, we'll go forward.
Hi everyone, my name is Trevor Johns. I am a developer programs engineer with the Android team.
Hi guys, my name is Alexander Lucas. I'm also a developer programs engineer with the Android Developer Relations team.
And I'm Ilya Furman. I work on the backend infrastructure for Google Play, formerly known as Android Market, and I'm also here to answer questions about expansion files.
Good, thank you. A couple of reminders before we get started. First of all, remember to mute yourself if you're online until you start talking so that we don't get echoes and feedback and things like that. Also remember to +1 us if you're out there or if you've joined us so that we get an idea of what's going on. As we've said, we're here, particularly today, we can answer questions about ODB, otherwise known as expansion files. And we already have a question that's in the Google Plus forum, so I think probably we want to go to that first. It's from Krishna, and it says, my app layout doesn't behave well when soft keyboard is open. It seems to add a white padding on top of the keyboard. May I know if there's a way to prevent it? Anybody want to try that?
It would actually be pretty difficult without seeing a screenshot. The first thing I'd be curious about is if it's adding to the soft keyboard or if it's a layer of padding above the soft keyboard, and that could be something that's at the bottom of your layout that's getting pushed up. But without a screenshot or some sort of context of the application, I don't really have enough information to speculate about why that would be happening.
Yeah. I also want to know which device you're running this on, and more specifically, which keyboard you're using. We have seen a couple third-party keyboards that actually don't draw themselves correctly, and as a result cause UI changes that shouldn't normally happen when a keyboard is on screen. So if you're using the built-in keyboard and you're seeing this, then that's probably something definitely wrong with your UI. If you're using a third-party keyboard, it may be your UI, or it may be something with the way the keyboard's implemented. Again, we need a bit more information here to go and actually determine what's going on.
Yeah, and one way that you can get that information to us is to take a screenshot and then post it to Stack Overflow, and then put a link to it on Moderator or come back to us. So we're getting somebody where I'm hearing typing sounds. Just a reminder to hit mute while you're not actually talking, just so that we don't hear your keyboard typing. Any other answers? Okay, let's move to the first question in the moderator. The question is, are you planning on making it possible for developers to reply to Play app comments? What about making it possible to email the commenter if they wish? We'll take these as suggestions, but our time machine rule is operable here. Our time machine, which is right here, is broken, and so we can't make predictions about things that are going to happen in the future. But if you would like a particular feature about Play, I would send in an email and post it on Stack Overflow. People do watch those things.
Yeah. And just as a follow-up, too, for this particular issue, it is something that we have heard from developers, and it is something that we're at least aware of. Again, we can't actually go and discuss anything in detail, but we are aware of it. So,
I'd also like to add that in the meantime, as a workaround, feel free to put your own contact information like on your own website for whatever pages you have set up devoted to this specific application, and provide other avenues for people to get in contact with you.
That's a good point. Although I think probably what many developers are looking for is something that Google provides to make it easier.
Oh,
and obviously we want to
definitely.
do that. So
Definitely.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. Let's move on. Hi, is there an easy way to live record my screen without HDMI MHL and display it on computer via Wi-Fi or USB? I'd like to show an app in front of an audience, and I don't know how to achieve it. I tried Screencast, but isn't live. Any ideas?
So this is an issue that we actually run into quite frequently here in developer relations. We want to go and produce a screencast for YouTube, or even we're just giving a presentation live and we want to go and show what our device is using. And our experience has been that using HDMI, which would include MHL, is almost always the best option for this. You can get HDMI capture cards and then feed the HDMI directly into your computer and display it. In fact, if you watch our Friday Hangout, which is the Friday review, this is exactly what we do to try and get devices showing on screen. There are a few alternatives if you don't want to use HDMI. Actually, there's really one alternative, and that's to go and, well, actually two. You can go and use ADB. It does have a screenshot command, and a couple of people have gone and taken that and written apps which will go and call that screenshot command in rapid succession. Rapid here is sort of a subjective term. The problem is it's slow. You're going to get about 1 or 2 frames per second. It's not really that awesome of an experience, which is why I still recommend HDMI. Now, your other option, if you want to go and display things live, is you can get a small USB camera. And we've done that as well, which actually just points at your screen. I can't remember the brand name of the one we've started using recently. Do you know?
I don't remember off the top of my head. There are, as a last-ditch effort, I've also seen a few presentations with those. I don't remember the. I want to say Wolf projectors, the kind that you usually see in high school classrooms.
Ah, yes.
It has like a little thing pointed down, and at whatever you want to show, and at the same time,
right,
projecting out onto the wall, sort of the analog solution.
Right. Those usually will not feed back into your computer. So I'm not sure what you're trying to, whether or not this is for a live presentation where you have a projector you're displaying on, or if this is for an online screencast. So depending on which way you're going, your options are going to change a little bit. But by and large, the best option is going to be HDMI. And if the problem is simply that you just don't have HDMI inputs, like I said, you can feed it into your computer and then go in and display it from there.
Right.
Ed Burnett has posted a comment that HDMI usually forces landscape mode.
Ah, yes.
That's true.
So there actually is a semi-hidden flag which we use, which I can't remember off the top of my head. If you dig through the Android source, you should be able to find it. I really can't remember it right now off the top of my head, but there is a way to actually go and tell it to force portrait. Alternatively, there actually are a couple apps on market which do the same thing, which I also can't remember the name of off the top of my head.
Actually, wasn't even aware that that was possible.
Yes,
that's
there is at least one app that I'm aware of that will force the device into portrait mode no matter what mode it's in.
Okay.
Good.
So there are ways to go and get around that. Again, you do have to either run a command over ADB or install third-party software, but it can be done.
Great. Thank you very much, Ed, for pointing that out, and thank you, gentlemen, for suggesting some solutions. Next question. Throughout the SDK, dynamically setting the height, width of various elements in code, not in XML, is usually restricted to pixels. Are there plans to allow usage of DP units instead of pixels? Well, because of the time machine restriction, we can't comment about plans, but we can comment about how you deal with this.
Yeah, so the answer is actually you already can. So if you take a look at the docs for that method call, it was, sorry, it just scrolled off my screen here, but it was, could you scroll up one again? Yeah, viewgroup.layoutparams. Right. So if you go ahead and look that up on the Android developer website, you'll see there's actually 3 constructors. There is one that goes and takes an integer width and height, which will be interpreted as pixels. But you can also pass it an attribute set object. And what that does is it basically that's how we go and instantiate those the view group from XML. And inside of the attribute set, any attribute that you specify in XML can be specified in code. So that'll give you a mechanism to go and pass in your length and width in DPs. So it's already possible today. You just have to make sure you're using the correct constructor.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Is there an API to query if an app is available on the Android market for the current user and device? From within my app, I would like to link to other apps, but only advertising those which the user can install.
Alex, do you want to take this one?
Sure. Well, the sad news is that there is currently no market querying APIs available. To answer the question of how one would filter like that since there's no APIs, that's kind of a tricky question. Any thoughts?
So actually, basically you said the same thing I was going to say. Right now, we don't have any public API to do this. If you wanted to, we were saying that before this we were talking about this question, you could go and do an HTTP request to Android Market, and it'll return a 404 if the app isn't available. Typically, this would happen if the app's been filtered out because of the country the user's in. However, you don't have any information about which device the user is running on. And unfortunately, there's really not a good way to go and test, to provide that information outside of the Market client application. So the short answer here is there's not really a good way to do this, unfortunately. You're just going to go and have to provide links into Market, and then if the app isn't available, when the user does try and follow it, Market will display a dialog saying that it's not available. Outside of that, I mean, if you can get some more information about these apps, it is an advertising thing, so I'm assuming you're working with the app developers. Get some information about where they want the app to show up and not show up, and do your own filtering there. It's not optimal, but that's the best advice we can give.
Great. Thank you very much. Next question is, which is the best way to define widths in multi-pane layouts? Should we use weight for percentage, or should we rely on dimensions defined on different density-specific resource files?
I'll take this one. I'm actually a big fan of using weight because I feel like it's it works best when you're going across a range of devices of different sizes, especially in a tablet scenario where a common sort of UI paradigm is to have sort of a nav element on the left, and then takes up maybe a quarter of the screen, and then a content element on the right. Let's see.
Yeah. Now I'm actually so. I mean, yeah. I mean, did you have anything else you wanted to add to that, or?
Let's see. I was looking at the second part, or different density-specific resources. You can add different density-specific resources. It seems like in 90% of the cases, weight works just fine. If there's some threshold past which you want to change the layout, then I would say go ahead and add density-specific ones.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hesitant to actually say either method is better than the other. They're both appropriate. Just if your UI looks correctly and you've tested it across the different screen dimensions, I can't really find fault with either approach there. Just whichever works best for you. Yeah. Now I do notice that we actually have all 10 live spots filled up with our Hangout. So are there any live questions that people want to ask us? And I think Joe was going to say something as well to that effect.
Right. I wanted to point out that we have two people from engineering here today to talk about expansion files in case you've got any questions. So if you've got live questions, please speak up or type them in, and we'll take a look at what's going on. In the meantime, while we're waiting for you to do that, we'll go on to the next question from Google Moderator, which is, what are the best practices for dealing with application crashes and errors? Any platform infrastructure coming along to help?
Oh, and by the way, I think, Robert, be sure to switch cameras there, too. Yes, but anyway, best practices for dealing with application crashes and errors. So, I mean, if you're not already familiar with it, Android Market does provide a crash reporting mechanism. So anytime an application crashes, a dialog pops up asking the user if they want to go and send crash report data to Google. When they do that, Android Market will go and display it in your publisher console, so you can go and review which crashes have occurred, which version of the app is running on, any user-entered comments, you get the stack trace, all that fun stuff. That said, there are a number of third-party alternatives that, if you're not getting the information you need from Market, you can use. I know that we were looking at one beforehand. Do you remember the name of it, Alex? It was...
I I can't remember the name of it. There was an open source solution. I had just done a quick Google search for Android crash reporting library. Actually, I think there are a few of them. I don't have personal experience with any of them.
Yeah, I mean, we usually just use the one that's in Android Market, so I can't actually give a recommendation for any of the third-party libraries. And I'd go and take that a step further and say if there's something that you want as far as crash reporting capability and it's not in Android Market, let us know. We want to go and make sure that that tool actually goes and covers, all the common use cases.
Right.
So if there's something that you're finding deficient, we want to hear about it.
Yeah. Also, don't forget that you have the option of rolling your own if you have any web programming experience. All you would really need to do is take the data that you want to save from the crash and like one HTTP call out to the right server with just a simple post of some data, and you can store it all in a database. We also have an analytics SDK if you would like to, which would actually be really handy for tracking crash reporting data and segmenting it across different things like platform versions and device types.
Okay, great. Thank you. We have several questions that I want to get through here before we answer any one of them because they're on chat.
Yeah, let's start with Davey's question, too.
Okay, Davey said live questions on a specific topic or any type of live questions are accepted. If it has to do with Android development, we can accept it. So fire away.
Actually, regarding the crash report.
Question we have is from Chris Pick. Someone trying to say something?
Yes.
Okay. Can you modify a drag shadow while it's being dragged? That is, can you change the drag shadow while it's over a target? This is for drag and drop, I'm assuming.
It's being dragged.
You should be.
I'm not actually sure.
You should be able to. I mean, it's intended that when the drag shadow is over a target, that you'll get a message saying that it's over the target, and that allows you to change aspects of the drag shadow. So my basic answer is yes, but I'd have to look it up.
Yeah, his response is actually correct, which is that the intention of that message is to
change the
underlying
target, but not the shadow.
For example, to highlight what you're about to drop onto.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it looks like you can't change. You can change the target appearance, but you can't change the shadow appearance. And if that's something that you're looking for, you may want to file a feature request. But Andy has pointed out that that's the intended functionality. Let's go back to Davey. He had a question on crash reports containing only Android packages, non-application packages. I'm not sure that I understand what that means. Is there any way to debug what went wrong through those crash reports?
So by only Android packages, you mean things that are not your application, so crash reports from the Android system apps.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes, the Android.app, Android.os.
Right.
Okay. So, I mean, if you go, usually there's a preview button there. Actually, maybe not for system apps. If you look at Logcat, you'll see the full stack trace, and you can see what's causing those crashes. Alternatively, if you do ADB bug report, you'll get that information as well. That being said, that's not something we normally expect most developers to have to deal with. That's, unless you're actually hacking on the OS itself and submitting patches, which we certainly love to receive. But as an app developer, usually,
But if it's coming through the Google Play Store, a crash report containing only these Android packages, how can I find out what went wrong inside the application, inside my application?
Well, if it's coming from the Play app, then it's not your application.
No, I mean, I'm getting a crash report from my application from somebody who bought it through the Play Store.
Yeah, so what happens is somebody sends you a crash report that says the application crashed. You look at it and you go, okay, it crashed, but it crashed in an Android package, not in part of my application.
Exactly. Something like this. I hope you can read it.
Yeah, I see it.
It doesn't contain any application-specific code that's coming from me. It's actually a null pointer somewhere in an activity thread.
Yeah, Robert, could you scroll to the top of that crash report for me? I'm just curious what's actually happening here.
Activity, stop activity, null pointer exception.
Okay, and you pulled this out of Logcat, out of DDMS?
No, the crash
the
report
user
is
sent it.
developer
Oh,
console.
okay.
Okay, so this is not actually one of the Android packages that's crashing per se. I mean, it's one of the system or one of the APIs we provide, but somewhere in there, you know, that code is interacting with your code. So I can see your question here, but so you're getting and there it scrolls again.
Right.
I mean, something is wrong about your application state. It's trying to go and stop your activity, and that's causing a null pointer exception. So the question is, why is that happening, right? Why is stop failing because of a null pointer exception? What part of your application is in an invalid state that's causing this? So, I mean, without seeing your code, I can't tell you off the top of my head what's happening here, but you know, my gut instinct here is you've done something that's placed your activity into a bad state.
Okay.
I would, in general terms, I would say that you have to approach this the same way as if you were testing your application with your own data and it crashed somewhere, which is you'd have to get the state of the application at the time that the crash occurred, if you can, from the user, and then look through your application and see if you can figure out why you're getting a particular crash, in this case a null pointer exception, at the place that it's occurring.
Yeah, the thing is that it's sent by a user. I don't know which user I can get into contact with that user. I can't reproduce that particular stack trace, so that's kind of the difficulty.
Yep. Well, developers, I know, run into the problem that they get error reports and then they can't reproduce them. I'm not sure what advice I can give you. Maybe the DevRel people can give you some better advice.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, without a way to contact the user directly, your options are limited here. But if we were to go and see a crash report like this on our end, what we'd do is we'd ask for the contents of ADB bug report. Yeah. And what that'll do is not only does it give you a copy of the system log, it also gives you the state of every process and all your application threads and all those fun internal details, which you don't just get from crash reports in the market. And that'll give you a little bit more information. That being said, you know, given the nature of this bug, I'm not even sure that that's going to help. I think really it's just going to be a matter of trying to take a look at your code and figuring out what you're doing that allows your application to get into the top state. I mean, it's not something that should happen naturally.
Right.
Ed points out in the chat that that stack trace shows up in a Stack Overflow question. Why does my application crash when I hit the home button? So that's not necessarily the issue is not necessarily happening for the same reason, but you might want to check. You just might want to mash the home button on a few different devices in a few different states in your app.
You could even
repro.
You could even go through Stack Overflow or just in general Google that null pointer exception stop activity and see if you hit anything.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Right.
Let's go on to this next question here.
Actually, live chat. Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say we should try and get through as many live questions as we can because we're at 10 people, nobody else can join.
I agree. I cannot log into my server for my app from the devices running on 2.3 and lesser, but it works on 4.0. It also works fine on our testing server, which also has certificates. Any thoughts on what's happening, or would you guys recommend that I use Bouncy Castle and I accept my certificate chain myself by importing the certificates into the app?
So I'm just trying to understand. So you're trying to go and do client authentication to your app? Is that what you're trying to do here?
Yes.
I mean, I'm missing some context from your question.
Yes, my production server has SSL certificates and the
okay, so you're trying to use SSL and do client authentication.
Yes. and it is
Okay,
failing.
so it's not that you're doing client authentication, it's your app is not accepting your server's SSL certificate.
Yes.
And so the problem is that basically your certificate authority is not trusted. Is that the problem?
It is trusted, and it is working fine on all the devices running on 2.3 and above, but in my app, it's, for some reason, the SSL certificate fails, and it gives me the certificate exception.
Okay, so you're saying it works in the browser, but not in your app.
No, it doesn't work in the browser on 2.1 and 2.2. It works in the browser on 2.3 and above.
Okay,
And
so on
in my-
2.1 and 2.2, your authority is not trusted then.
Yes, it says that it's not trusted, but we checked everything and they are trusted, and it has the complete certificate chain.
Well, if it's not accepting the certificate, then that means it's most likely not trusted. Now, trusted it's something that's computed on a device-by-device basis, right? If whatever is at the top of your trust chain is not in the list of trusted root certificates, then that whole chain is going to fail. So it's possible that whatever certificate you're using, the authority wasn't trusted on those older devices. I mean, is that what you're seeing then? Does that sound correct?
That sounds correct, but I looked at all the providers, and they're all there. The whole certificate chain, starting from the beginning to the end, are all there. And
So you
I
looked
looked
at the list of trusted roots on 2.1 and 2.2?
No, I did not look at those.
Okay, so
I looked
it's
at the certificates that
you haven't tested then. So that would be what I'd do. Go take a look at the Android source. Take a look at the list of trusted root certificates on 2.1 and 2.2. It doesn't matter what you specify in your certificate chain. If whatever is at the top of that chain is not a trusted root. And the list of trusted roots is specified in a file that is shipped with the device. And so if whatever root you're using was not trusted at the time the device that OS release was made, it doesn't matter. You can put whatever you want in your certificate chain. And it won't validate because the certificate at the top is not in the list of hard-coded certificates. And,
okay, that makes sense.
yeah, like I said, it's a file that ships with the device. You can go and take a look at our source code, see what we do, accept. And if it's not trusted, you have two options. You can either go and switch to a different certificate authority, one that actually does go and resolve back to a trusted root, or you can go and implement SSL yourself and then go and manually override the list of trusted providers.
And
I also had, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to interject. You don't actually have to implement SSL yourself. It's fairly easy if you want to override the trust chain, and you can implement pretty much one class. I apologize. There's a factory that I haven't used in over 2 years, which is why I'm not remembering the name. But excuse me, the amount of code it will take to basically say, I need encryption, but I can't trust this particular certificate, or I can't establish trust, but use it anyway. It's less than a page full of code to do that.
That's good to know.
Great.
And I can follow up with you later. I can point you at the code.
Excellent.
I just can't remember off the top of my head where it is.
Okay, so it sounds like that.
But it is in open source.
Yeah, that sounds like that's the approach you're going to want to do then. Is just go and manually mark your certificate as trusted within your app. And as long as no other apps need to go and use that certificate, then that should probably be fine. I mean, there still is the problem that if any other apps do need to connect to your server, they'll run into the same problem. But if your app is the only one talking to your server, then this sounds like a good approach.
Okay. We have another question that I want to get to in chat. I seem to be having trouble with binding uniforms to a GLS shader and render script, where all the uniforms I bind are being converted to float type. Is this normal, or is this a bug I am introducing?
Is anybody here familiar enough with GL to actually answer this?
Or render script.
Yeah.
I don't have experience with it.
No one today, huh?
Sorry.
All right. Could I ask an extension on that? If anyone knows RenderScript here.
Robert, you know RenderScript. So yeah, Robert's our producer off camera here. He wrote some of the RenderScript samples, so he might be able to help.
Okay.
Someone want to pass him a microphone so he can answer? Thank you.
Can you tell me, if you can't answer the GLSL question, can you at least tell me what the purpose of the slots for the bind constants member function is for the program builders?
I can't remember off the top of it. I have to look at the method signatures or function sigs.
Okay, it's basically an allocation and an integer for the slot number, and the documentation is woefully lacking on the explanation.
This is a shader. This is a fragment shader?
It exists for both fragment and vertex shaders.
Usually those slots are for textures. So I'd have to take a look. Can you post this question on Stack Overflow?
Yeah, I can. When you're thinking about it, I guess it's specific to binding uniforms for the shaders.
Usually the slots are just indexed into, I guess, the separate uniforms that you're binding. So I don't know how many uniforms you can actually bind, but the slots are indexed into those uniforms.
Okay. Should I also post the GLSL shader question in Stack Overflow?
Yeah, do that too.
Okay.
Yeah, so yeah, post to the Stack Overflow, and then also post a link, actually preferably to the comments on the, not the chat, not the group chat here, but actually the comments for your, for this Hangout back on the activity stream in Google+. Because we lose the chat after we close this. So that way we at least have a link to your question after the Hangout ends, and we can go and be sure to go and pull it up and do some additional research for you there.
Okay. Appreciate it.
Totally.
Thank you. The next question we have is another one from Ed Burnett, which we'll get to, and there's actually a reply from Jared. Can you think of a reason why not to use multiple GL surface views in a single activity? Is there a limit? And then he gives an example layout.
Yeah, so
and then Jared said, I seem to remember seeing that there's a substantial overhead for each individual GS surface view, but I could be mistaken.
So I know Roman Guy, who just gave a talk on some of these topics recently at GDC, which unfortunately was not videotaped. We're trying to go and at least compile the slides from these talks and post them online, but that's not ready yet. Oh, I wish you were here. You'd actually be a great person to answer this. There is, so if I remember correctly, and I could be completely wrong here, so anybody here, feel free to jump in and correct me, because I'm sure I'm going to make some mistakes. But, I mean, each GL surface view, if I remember correctly, actually does go and generate a separate canvas that's basically drawing onto, to put it bluntly. And so because of that, you actually do get quite a bit of overhead each time you create one of those. So I'm not going to say that there's a limit, but every time you do it, you're going to go and add latency to your UI. So for that reason, I try and keep the number of surface views you create to a minimum. And if you do need more, what are the other primitives for going and doing GL rendering? There's GL surface view. It's not canvas view. No.
I thought it was.
Texture view. Yeah, texture view. Yeah, so I think texture view is the preferred approach when you're actually trying to do something more complicated, and it has a lower overhead there. Again, I could be completely wrong, and I really wish I could link you to Roman's talk right now, but I can't. Now, I think he actually did have some Google I/O talks on this topic too, which might help. But yeah, I can't give you an authoritative answer, but that sounds correct off the top of my head, unless anybody. Yeah.
All I can say is Ed's answer is texture view is only in newer Android versions.
Okay, so at this point I'm going to go ahead and go with our Stack Overflow answer, which is post a question on Stack Overflow, give us the link, and we'll actually go and ask around and get you a more authoritative answer after the show.
Yeah, due to the breadth of the Android platform, every now and then, more than every now and then, actually pretty often, we'll get questions that just no one in this room knows the answer to. And so our fallback is, like, if you post a Stack Overflow and give us a link to that, even though we don't know the answer, we generally know the people who do. And we can, Stack Overflow gives us the, first of all, it's a hard link place where we can go and actually answer the question. and that way we can answer it for anyone in the future who has that same question.
Yeah. So yeah, short answer is give us the link and we'll find the answer for you.
Yeah.
Okay. The next question that we have in Google Moderator, since we've covered everything in chat, is what are the best practices at Google for testing Android apps?
This one we can definitely talk about. So, I mean, it depends on what the scope of your testing is. If you're trying to go and just run your app and see best practices for just doing QA on your own. I mean, first thing, turn on strict mode. Strict mode is invaluable for going and catching a lot of really silly mistakes. For example, doing any blocking I/O from your UI thread. You can go and turn this on programmatically, and then as of newer versions, is it version 3 or version 4, we added it to the developer options menu as well, so you can turn it on system-wide. But again, even if you are running an older device, you can go and turn it on from within your application, and then have it go and flash your screen red or display a crash report anytime you do one of these things you shouldn't do. Now, as far as more...
there's the monkey.
Yeah, if you... Yeah,
Right.
monkey's
There's
a
the
good
Monkey
option.
Runner.
Yeah.
There's the Monkey Runner is a library that lets you simulate a UI interaction by, correct me if I'm wrong here, manually creating touch events like all over the screen.
Yeah.
We also have.
So now we're
Monkey.
That's a monkey.
Yeah, so,
Monkey sends random UI events.
Right.
Monkey Runner is a library that allows you to control the UI and various aspects.
Okay.
Monkey Runner lets you control the monkey. So if you think of there's that saying about 1,000 monkeys typing on typewriters. That's Monkey.
Right.
Monkey Runner lets you go and write scripts that go and let you do basically automated testing. So strict mode is something you'd normally use. If you actually probably good useful for any of these tools, but you can use strict mode on your own if you're just running your app. All these other tools are something you'd use more as part of a QA suite. So you'd write a Monkey Runner script, which goes and performs a series of actions on the device to make sure things perform the way you intend them to. And so branching off of that, you have a number of other tools you can use as well. So JUnit, of course, is a popular one. So you can actually go and write functional tests in JUnit, or I'm not sure how long. You can go and write tests in JUnit and have them actually execute on the device, and then it'll report the results back to your computer. There's also Robodium, which takes JUnit a step further, and the best way to describe Robodium is it's Selenium for Android. Now, Robodium is not actually an official Android project. It's an open source project, but I do know a number of app developers have found it incredibly useful, so it's worth mentioning.
If you don't mind, I just
go right ahead.
Suggest a couple of things, since the question was about best practices, not just excellent survey, but
yes.
In terms of best practices, I just wanted to throw in a couple of sort of key suggestions for some of the tools you mentioned. For the monkey, the way the monkey works is it clicks your UI really, really fast. Now that has a really beneficial result, which is that it finds race conditions in your app. Where we see a lot of problems with the monkey is, for example, let me give you an example. If you have a worker thread, such as an async task, which is busy chugging away at the network or disk I/O or whatever, and the async task completes and wants to do something to your UI, like say update a status indicator, but meanwhile the user, there's those race conditions where the user exits the activity or goes to a new activity, and then you get this completion. You'll almost never see these in your own testing because it's hard to click that fast, and they're very short windows of opportunity. But that's the kind of thing the monkey's going to find for you, is especially it's going to find these race conditions. Now, the big caveat with the monkey is because it's clicking very rapidly, it can be very destructive. So if you're going to use the monkey, I strongly recommend that you look into some of the monkey options, because you may want to tell the monkey to stay out of certain activities. They may just be too dangerous to test. And the other is within your code, you can actually, there's a system call, and I'm sorry, I don't remember the name. I'm not very good at that today, which says, is the monkey running? Or
I think
is the user a monkey?
Is user monkey,
right.
Yes.
And what you can do is in your code, you can put a few, you can sort of put escape hatches in some of the most dangerous operations and say, if the monkey clicked that, don't really do it because it might be delete all my data. or send email to my mom, or whatever things your app does. So with those caveats, the monkey is super powerful, and you can find bugs that are real bugs. It's just they're really hard to find any other way. And then the second one I would just want to point out was you mentioned JUnit. There's a number of, if you're familiar with JUnit, you're probably familiar with the standard test case class. There's a number of extensions of that, Android test case, provider test case, et cetera, et cetera. Learn those because those provide the support you'll need for testing the standard Android structures that we use in the framework. Right. And the one I really want to point out is the provider test case 2, which Joe and I have had long discussions about in the past. It's really important because it allows you to write test cases that are non-destructive to your user data. Because what you don't want to do is every time you run a unit test, have it wipe out your own personal data in your app that you've also been testing with. You want to sort of build a sandbox for the test data, but when you're done, you want to have your own data still there where you left it. That way you will be feel more free to run tests a lot instead of not wanting to run tests because they mess up your system.
Right.
So
that's all. The developer guide has documentation on using activity instrumentation test case 2 and provider test case 2, including how to run them. And it discusses things like the mock classes that allow you to create basically what are they're not really mocks, they're stub objects for use in testing. And in addition, we have sample apps. There's Spinner and Spinner Test, and there's a test case. A lot of the sample apps have test projects built into them. There's a really good one for provider test case 2 in the Notepad sample app.
Okay. Now, let's see, other things worth mentioning on testing.
I would say Lint. I think
yes.
between Lint is new as of, I want to say, ADT 16 or 17.
Sounds about right.
And it's a compile time check, so it's not really runtime testing of the app, but between Lint and
find bugs.
Hmm?
You want to use Lint and find bugs.
And find bugs. Okay, between Lint, find bugs, and strict mode, I think you will get a lot of the low-hanging fruit in terms of just like seeing where like all the different little nooks and crannies where your app could explode.
Yeah. Now, other things worth mentioning too. Now, we don't use these tools very much ourselves, but I do know a number of third-party developers have used them, so they're worth mentioning. You also so there's Device Anywhere and Testroid. Now, these are third-party commercial solutions, and they're not going to do they're not test frameworks. What they do is they provide you access to hardware that you wouldn't otherwise have. So for Device Anywhere, you can actually go and check out an Android device that's gotten wired up into a box, which gives you remote access. Testroid will go and take your Monkey Runner, your JUnit, and your Bodium scripts, and actually execute them on an entire battery of devices. They have one or two other devices in their lab, and it runs them on them all concurrently, and will give you test reports. So these are tools you can use after you've gone and actually made your test suites to go and widen the breadth of the number of devices you're covering with them. Like I said, we don't use them very much ourselves, and this isn't necessarily an endorsement, other than I do know that there are a number of third-party developers who have used them and found them useful. So, anything else anybody wants to add on the topic of testing?
Test early and often.
Yes, early and often.
Yeah. And actually, one other thing, too. We do have a series at Google called Testing on the Toilet, where engineers go and write short articles on topics about testing code. And there have been a number of articles about Android. Most of these are internal because they deal with our internal systems, but a number of them are not. And they're just general best practices for, say, testing in Java or testing on Android. And we do post those to a blog where you can find them. I don't remember the URL off the top of my head, but if you just search for Testing on the Toilet, you should find them, and some of the articles in there might actually be useful. So take a skim through those.
One other thing worth pointing out is there's in the Eclipse plugin for Android development, it actually adds the ability to create a test project, which you can attach to your Android project in Eclipse, and that way you can actually do most of your testing you can write your test cases in Eclipse, and they'll run whenever you debug the application.
Okay, so I think we've covered plenty on testing, so let's go ahead and move on to the next question. Now, I don't see any more live questions. If any of you folks on the live stream do have a question, feel free to speak up, and we'll definitely be sure to get to you. But let's move on to the next moderator question. So, let's see, attributes from Nico from France asks, attributes from a library project aren't accessible from any XML file in our main project. If we specify the library namespace for the attributes, it throws an error. If we don't, the attributes are ignored. It's a well-known bug. Will it be fixed in ADT 17? So this is sort of our speculative question clause here. We can't go and tell you what's coming, but I will say it's a known issue. We do develop the developer tools in the open, so you can actually go ahead and take a look at what's actually changed there. And my understanding is that this bug is being worked on. I can't promise that it's going to be fixed for the next release, but I do know that there is work taking place to go and address this. So actually my advice would be to go ahead and try one of the preview releases. We do issue preview releases of our developer tools. I think we're on preview release 3 right now. Take a look, see if it has fixed the issue for you. And if not, like you said, it is a known bug. Feel free to just go ahead and monitor that bug on our issue tracker. For those who aren't aware of it, b.android.com is where we put all of our bugs. You can go ahead and take a look in there, and actually, if you star the issue, you'll get email notifications whenever there's a status update. But we are working on it. Right. Let's go ahead and move to the next question here. Which is, in case of missing or delayed C2DM messages, so C2DM is our push notification service, is there a way to check if Google Messaging service on the device is connected, running properly, and receiving these push messages? What's the best way to debug? And this is from Sarah Huzzi in San Francisco. Sorry if I didn't pronounce that name right. First things first, make sure you are getting that HTTP 200 response from the server. It sounds like you are. From there, we don't see it often, but there have been cases where the connection to our servers does get stuck. And the easiest way to go and reset it is to go ahead and open up Google Talk, disconnect, and reconnect. So, little known fact, Google Talk actually uses the same transport mechanism on the device used for push messaging. So if you disconnect and reconnect Talk, sometimes it'll go and fix that. The other thing that we occasionally see is users are behind corporate firewalls that go and block the port we use for messaging. I can't remember the port number off the top of my head. It is mentioned online if you search around for it.
I'm not sure what it is either.
Yeah, I think it's 5. It's 5 something, 4 digits, 5,000 something. But if you are behind a port or a firewall that does go and block that port, we can't actually deliver any push messages. And unfortunately, there's not much we can actually do about that. So if you are unlucky enough to be on a network that's hostile to push messaging, my advice is to have some fallback code. If I'm hesitant to go and recommend this too heavily, because part of the reason why we like push messaging is to go and save battery life. But if it is absolutely imperative that you receive those push messages, you can go and have a poll that occasionally, like say every hour, checks for any messages that haven't been delivered yet, with the caveat that doing this will hurt battery life. And most of our apps, I actually don't think do this.
I think part of the, that is a workable answer, but it's sort of dependent on the client side. It's sort of dependent on having access to the physical device. I think part of the question is, from the server, is it possible to determine if the client can receive C2DM messages?
Well, so actually that's a good question. What you could do in that case is actually have the server acknowledge the message. So if you've used our in-app billing framework, then we sort of take a similar approach there. When you send when a purchase notification gets sent to the device, we ask the application to go and send us back an acknowledgement message to go and say that the application has received and committed the purchase. You could do something similar in your app. So once a C2DM message is received, have some code that sends an acknowledgement back to your app or to your application server and updates a flag in the database saying that this message has been received. So that would at least give you a little bit of debug information there. But like I said, there's not going to be much on the server side you can go and do to fix this. Most likely the user is on a network that just can't receive push messages.
And if the user uses such a network, then many things will be broken on the device. Calendar will not work, Gmail will not work, Market will not work, so user will likely notice this in other apps as well.
Right, yeah. We do use the same communication channel for a lot of services on the device, so yeah,
Okay.
if everything's broken, that's a sign that push messaging is broken too.
Let's move forward. The next question is SQLite Open Helpers on upgrade method only meant for basic structure changes? Get writable database can't be called from it, which is a problem if you have DAO classes which call get writable database. How are you setting up non-trivial DB utils?
Okay. Yeah, on upgrade is very specifically meant for structure changes only. I mean, that's where you're going to add columns. You can remove and replace triggers, things within SQLite, but I think you pretty much want to stop there. I think it's safe to say.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and looking at it from another angle too, you don't want to go and try and open two different writable connections to a SQLite database, which is probably where the get writable database is calling if you try and call it from within your DAO classes.
My guess is that this person is wanting to not just add columns, for example, but actually do some migration, which is why they're asking about using some more sophisticated stuff. And really, again, I don't think on upgrade is where you're necessarily going to want to do that. In on upgrade is where you would want to start building in the new columns or new triggers, but you're going to have to then fire up a migration pathway in for example, in an async task after you've opened the way to think of it is that the database is not really open yet. Your on upgrade is during the open.
Right. Thank you. Next question. HTC has a feature called Fast Boot. This is a feature that instead of turning the phone off, puts it into deep hibernation. This has led to problems for me as I want to handle boot completed.
Okay, we actually have not heard of this issue before now, but we're going to go ahead and check with our contacts at HTC and see what the recommended approach here is. So unfortunately, we don't have an answer that we can give you on the show right now. We're going to go ahead and look into it, and if you go ahead and post this question next week, we can give you a status update.
Have they been proactive and already posted to Stack Overflow?
Yes, we have the link, so that'll help us remember to go and answer it. We'll also post the question to that Stack Overflow question. So we'll post an answer to the Stack Overflow.
Okay.
Yes.
Let's move on. We're getting towards the end. I also want to remind people, both online and listening in, that we have some experts here on expansion files if you want to ask questions about those. They've just been announced. I hope this is the right place to ask. Google has become more confusing. Since Google Play started, my app went from good sales to 0 sales overnight. Coincidence? It still has a good showing in the search. How has Play altered traffic?
I think the answer there is yes, it's a coincidence. We're not aware of any issues where the switch to Google Play has resulted in a significant change in traffic to applications. That being said, I do vaguely recall that there were a few apps that actually saw some anomalous data, not because of the switch to Google Play, but because of our new application statistics rollout. Those issues I thought had actually been corrected already. But if you are still seeing this, maybe give it a couple more days to see if the stats go and correct themselves. Now we do have a couple folks from Market here, so actually, I mean, did you guys know of anything?
No, in fact, I mean the Play rollout was a really important rollout for us for a lot of reasons. But what you've seen so far is primarily a change in the brand from Android Market to Google Play. It's still all the same servers. It's basically the same client running. So changes that affect any given app, as you said, are almost certainly coincidental. Obviously, without knowing the app, it's hard to dig any further, but I wouldn't expect any changes like that.
Next question. Screen rotation on the Galaxy Nexus is really slow. Takes several seconds to rotate. I understood that the Android code contained some kind of hard-coded delay on the rotate, making it always slow. What's the reason behind that?
I can't say with great certainty. Intuition sort of dictates that would just be to prevent unnecessary rotates. For instance, if your phone is upside down in your pocket and you pull it out and hold it up to your ear, that with zero delay, that would be 2 rotations, each rotation destroying all the activities or destroying the current activity and recreating it for essentially no reason.
Yeah. If you've ever done any work on robotics, you learn very quickly that sensor data is incredibly noisy, and so you always have to have some sort of delay added to go and filter out unwanted noise. And like I said, nobody in this room, I think, has actually worked on the code that actually handles screen rotation, except as app developers. But I think Alex is probably correct here. It's probably just there to go and filter out that noise to prevent unwanted rotation.
Yeah, I would say several seconds sounds like something else may be going on. Because,
Yeah, I mean, several seconds does seem excessively slow.
I mean,
But I mean, did he say? Oh, he did say several seconds.
Yeah, I'm sitting here trying it, and I'm seeing about a half-second delay, which is appropriate for the kind of debounce that we're describing.
Yeah.
I have in the past seen delays when there was when developers tried to put a little bit too much in the on-destroy method, like trying to save a whole bunch of states, like saving a whole bunch of unnecessary stuff, or making last-ditch calls out to the network or something like that, so that the activity took too long to be destroyed so that it could be recreated in the new orientation.
Right.
I would say if you're noticing this more in your application as opposed to just the phone in general, no matter what's open, I would take a look at what's happening when your application is destroyed and see if you can smooth some of that out.
Right. I might also say that if you're getting complaints from your users about this for your application, you should check to see if they're running into the same problem with other applications on the same phone. And if they're not, then you probably need to take a look at your application to see if there's ways that you could speed up what's going on when you do a rotation.
Were you guys talking about the Nexus rotation?
Excuse me?
Were you guys talking about the Galaxy Nexus rotation?
Yes.
Yep.
I posted that question actually, and I see it on like several applications, like the Dropbox application. See, it takes like a couple of seconds.
Can you do that one more time? We only just now saw your large screen.
Oh, okay. So.
Yep.
Okay.
Go.
That was a couple of seconds.
Yeah.
But this is running like Android 4.0.2.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You want to have a chat with developers of that app in that case.
Right, but say you open up some other app that's part of the system,
Yeah,
like
it's on
let's
every
go with
app.
something like
Hold on for a second. Go ahead.
Google Maps. I have it on every application. For example, Google Maps.
Go ahead. 2001, 2002.
That was about a half second.
That was no more than 2 seconds.
More than a second, I think. No?
Okay.
Well,
But I read somewhere that in the Android source code there was a delay specifically written for the rotation.
no, it's not that there's a hard-coded delay. What there is there's debouncing on the sensor noise because the rotation sensors are definitely, if you took out the debouncing, you would find that, for example, as you were walking, the littlest hand movements would cause your screen to flip back and forth. It's something that's actually a lot of attention has been paid to, but as these guys have been describing, some of the apps aren't doing a very good job on their own rotation.
Because, for example, on the browser, yeah,
Right.
probably
So,
right.
yeah, I mean, you have to remember when you
Understood.
rotate your screen, most apps actually are going to go and restart their activity. So any code involved in creating or destroying that activity that takes time is going to go and slow that process down. So I think that's mostly what you're seeing rather than a hard-coded delay in the system. It is just the time it takes the application to go and restart. And so
Okay.
for that reason, as an application developer, you should always try and keep the amount of work involved there to a minimum.
And has that changed, like in ICS? Has it become slower by nature, or?
It shouldn't have become slower now. I mean, you do have a larger screen.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there is additional work there too. I mean, that doesn't explain what you're seeing with, say, Dropbox. And without actually running their code through some sort of analysis, I'm not sure exactly what the hot point is there that's causing the slowdown. That would probably be what I'd do, is I'd try and find out exactly where my code is spending all the time. And we do have some tools that actually go and help with that. Do you remember what the name of that tool is that does hotspot analysis?
Not off the top of my head. I want to say it was TraceView, but I
We
could be
don't.
wrong.
Oh, okay. We're running out of time here, so I'd like to get to one more question, if at all possible. There's a question here that says, how do you use OpenGL in a home screen widget? Or can you?
I don't actually believe that's possible.
Yeah, so
Home screen widgets are
They're restricted to remote.
Yeah,
restricted remote views, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So can't really include OpenGL in there.
right. In
Okay.
fact, there's a number of things you can't do, including simple things like including a text field, which is why you'll notice on any apps that include or anytime you have that Google search widget on the home screen, when you tap on it rather than actually typing into it, we actually switch you to an activity, and that's because you can't actually type into a widget. So there are a number of restrictions, and OpenGL would be one of them.
Okay, great. Well, unfortunately, once again, we've run out of time with still more questions to answer, so we're going to have to say goodbye for today. Hope to see you again next week, and until then, everybody,
All right. See ya.
Hey guys.
take